I wanted to learn a little bit of Bati Legani with you. Make a few points here. In general, the Maamer of Bati Legani have been taught around or on Yud Shvat, which is the day that the previous Rebbe passed away, and the following year, his son-in-law became the seventh Chabad Rebbe. Each of the Maamerim of Bati Legani are based on one of the 20 chapters which were written by the Friedeker Rebbe and first published on Yud Shvat, on the first Yud Shvat, the day that the Friedeker Rebbe passed away. He had already, so to speak, planned the publishing for that date, and a series of Maamerim that started with Bati Legani came out from the Friedeker Rebbe, and that is the foundation of the following years of the Bati Legani Maamerim that the Rebbe would share each year, elucidating another chapter of those 20 chapters. So in the year 5724, and also in the year 5744, the Rebbe's Bati Legani primarily focused on chapter 14 of the Friedeker Rebbe's Bati Legani. We're going to learn from the year 5724. In that particular year, the Rebbe gave 3 separate Maamerim, one on Friday night, one on Saturday, and one on Matzah Shabbos. The first 2 we don't really have. We have a little bit of one of them, and it's the third one, the one that was given on Matzah Shabbos, that we have that in existence, and that's the Maamer I'm going to talk to you about. That particular Maamer talks about it's titled Bati Legani, as most of these Maamerim are titled, and obviously it talks about the first Nakuda, the first important part that each of them, these Maamerim, have in common, which is I came to my garden, and that's going on the idea of the Ikar Shechina B'Tachtonim Haisa, the primary place where the transformation of divine presence, so to speak, the primary residence of the divine, was here in this world, and through a series of 7 sins over the course of 7 generations, the Shechina went up 7 levels, and then subsequently 7 generations of holy people, starting with Abraham and culminating with Moshe, brought the Shechina down from the 7th level back into this world. And that's basically the introduction to almost every single Maamer in this category of Bati Legani. But then you have the particulars of that specific Maamer. So one of the things, and the particular thing that we're covering, is that we talk about the quality of the Ein Sof, that it has no end and no tachlis. And when we talk about there's in how low the divine light can go. And we contrast that ultimately to the concept that no matter how elevated those qualities are, both in infiniteness and in ability to go as low as possible, the ultimate goal is the nitzachon, is the victory. And to obtain victory, there's the bizbuz ha'otzros, there's the giving away of the chambers of riches, the hidden storage houses of wealth. But before we get to that, we're going to describe 2 different words that represent the creative power and the relationship of that which was created and its awareness of its source. So the 2 words are mahava and mechaya. Mahava is the one who brings into being, and the mechaya is the one who gives life. Now, it sounds like, they're the same. What's the difference? But one way to look at it is the Talmud describes the relationship between the body and the soul in terms of how to also understand the relationship between God and the world. So one way of putting it is as follows. You recognize that you're alive, and the awareness of that aliveness within you is that there's something that distinguishes the inanimate, the body, the body that would be a corpse without that soul, and the living, breathing, functioning, thinking, feeling person who, because of that aliveness, incorporates the physical and makes it alive. So when you contemplate that a little bit, you have this kind of sensation like, who is the aliveness? The aliveness is coming from the one who gives life. So it's the life giver. It's the life force that creates the consciousness of the life giver that we call God, we call the creator. But when you see something that exists, but you don't see so much it being alive, it's just existing, that is more along with the idea that although it exists, I almost could think that it just kind of exists, like it's a matter of fact. There's a reason why we call it matter, materialism, and matter of fact. It just is. I don't know why it is. It's somehow it somehow came into being. People struggle with trying to figure out exactly how to explain how things came into being, but somehow came into being, and here it is. Therefore, the goal is that just like we are aware of the creative energy that gives us our aliveness, that contemplation should ultimately transfer into the awareness of creation of matter, being also coming from a live, living source of the creator of God. Now, as we get deeper into this concept, the Rebbe introduces something from the Rambam, which is really what I want to spend a lot of time explaining and talking about with you today. Not too much time. So, there's this concept called the Kalim of Atzilut. Now, the Kalim of Atzilut represent this paradox. On the one hand, they're the vessels of a world which is divine. So in the very nature, those two things are a contradiction. A vessel represents something in which God is concealed, but a world that is divine represents a place in which God is not concealed. So the question then becomes, how could there be vessels in the world of Atzilut that on the one hand are within the realm of the divine, on the other hand, we're calling them a vessel, and they have either the potential to conceal, they'll manifest in the worlds below them, the worlds of Bria, Yitzhira, and Asiya, in a way that the actual concealment will take place. Or perhaps it's just like God has the power of the infinite, he also has the power of the finite. Because we all like to think of God as infinite. Infinite has no limit. But what about the idea of self-limiting, the ability for God to impose an order and a structure on something that we ordinarily want to not categorize with any limitations? We want to categorize as having no limits and no confinements. And yet that itself becomes the confinement when we get obsessed about the infiniteness of God, and we have no way of allowing him, giving him the permission to have what we call the koach hagvul, the ability, the power to limit, to self-limit. So, for example, the idea that God says, I am one and not many, that's it. On the one hand, that sounds like infinite. On the other hand, it's a self-limit that he's not going to duplicate himself. The same thing with the Torah, that here's the Torah, I'm giving you the Torah. I'm not going to give you a new Torah that's going to repudiate the original Torah. Again, a self-limit. And that's that idea is that God limits himself in his own way to be one, to give us a one Torah. Now, into this context, in this conversation of this concept of this limiting the infinite, we come into this concept in human terms. A human being has some spark of divinity, we call it a soul. And the essence of the soul is connected, Yechida Liyachtech. There's this unique element of soul that really transcends the selfishness of the individual. On some level, it transcends the qualities that make one apart from someone else, because on that level, it's connected to the source in where we are all one. So even though it's still unique to you, but its uniqueness to you doesn't express itself in a way in which one is in opposition to another. It's more in a state of the unified aspect of the soul and divine source. Now, yet here we are. And that same source that we call Yechida, that then comes into the Chaya, and then to the Neshama, and then to the Ruach, and then into the Nefesh, that same thing will then enclose itself in a body ultimately, although we talk about Chai and Yechida as having some transcendent beyond body, but their mislabesh, or their lower levels, are enclosed within the body, within the mind, and within the ability to communicate, including the idea that a person can communicate through writing. So what is a person doing when they write something? They're self-limiting their power of expression into their hand, into a particular letter and word and sentence and paragraph and ideas that manifest through the writing. On the other hand, think of the source of all that, the transmission and chain of the mislabesh, that which is enclosed in that which will then eventually come into the writing of the words. Now, how would that work in the world of Atzilut? Because it's a divine world, and yet we're saying God is going to constrict himself, going to find the quality of finite within his infiniteness, is going to find the ability to have finiteness on some level. Now, here's where, to me, it gets fascinating, where we can ask in general, what is the Rebbe's mahalach in learning Rambam? And the answer can be summarized in this one statement, where he says that just like we talked about this revelation and self-limiting of somebody writing, it's not so distant to say that on a divine level, what God is doing in the world of Atzilut has a similarity, as stated in the Rambam. And in the note 99, he says, you could look this up in Hilchos Yesod HaTorah, the 2nd chapter, the 10th halacha, as well as in Hilchos Tshuva, the 5th chapter, and the 5th halacha, as well as the end of the Shemona Prakim to the Rambam. Shehu v'chachmaso echad, that God and his wisdom are one. Hu hayodea, v'hu hayedua, v'hu hadea atzma hakol echad. God is that which is known. He is the one who knows. He is that which is known, and he is the knowledge itself. in Hakol Echad, all one. Okay, now this is one of the most interesting Rambams that you could find. As I mentioned in the note 99, he brings down two sources within Mishnah Torah. It's also repeated and expanded upon in the first section of Mara Nevuchim in chapter 68, where he says it's a philosophical concept. People who are not aware of the philosophy behind it, even wise people, are probably going to misunderstand this. Let me look at this. Let me quote the Rambam himself so that you pull back and see the law in Hilchos Yisod HaTorah in the 10th chapter. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makir amitasa v'idea oso kamo shehi. God knows his truth and has knowledge of it the way it is. His knowledge isn't a knowledge that's outside of him, the way we know it. Us and our knowledge isn't one. But God, the Creator, who he and his knowledge and his existence or life is one from every direction, from every angle. If he had a normal life, the way we know things, then there would be more than one God. Who would be him, his aliveness, and his knowledge. May not ever came, but it's not the way it is. But he's one from every angle, all manners of unity. Now here's where the Rebbe quotes. He's the knower, he's the known. He's the knowledge itself. All one. But there is no ability of the mouth to express this, and the ear to hear this, not in the heart of a person to comprehend this adequately. Okay, and then he brings a proof text for it. And then he says, therefore, when he has knowledge and awareness of the created things, it's not the way we know them. He knows them because of himself. Therefore, the way he knows things, he knows himself, he knows everything along with it. Wow. This is an amazing Rambam. And it's even more amazing that he has to then reconcile how God knows what's going to happen with free choice. How do we have free choice if God knows what's going to happen? And that's what he does in Hilchos Tshuva. So let's just say that in a little bit of an explanation is in order, with the knowledge that this is something that you need to study many years of philosophy as a part of being able to understand more Nevuchim to properly understand this. But we're going to simplify it. The Rambam understands that more Nevuchim explains the following thing. That let's say a person understands the concept of a tree. If you look at a tree, you see a tree, but behind the physical ability of what a tree is and what it does is a conceptual tree. And you can conceive of what a tree represents. It comes from a seed, and then it grows into something that has roots and branches, and it takes the soil from and nutrients to the water and the photosynthesis, and then you could apply that in its more like kind of conceptual concept of, let's say, a root and a branch and a fruit, where something has a source and then it branches out. So we could then call biology, we could call it a tree of life. or we could call Kabbalah a tree of life based on the different soul things. So all of a sudden, the idea of what a tree is becomes front and center to the person who's contemplating what is the essence, what is the source of the tree. In other words, we see the tree as a manifestation of something that has roots and branches and fruits, but where is that coming from? That beautiful tree is a conceptual tree. When a person recognizes that there's a concept of the tree, the Rambam says, there's a relationship there between the individual's vision of intellect of what the tree is that's added to who he was before he had that understanding. Now, it could be that there's a oneness in the mental ability and that it becomes one with the concept of the tree and the mental ability to perceive the concept of the tree. That has a certain unity, but it's not unified in a human being in the sense that there's the person before that knowledge came into them, there's the person once that knowledge came into them, and there's a change in the person. How do we not have change in God? Because God is not a human. Therefore, all that is, all that was, and all that will be, all the unfolding of every physical act of history happens in a way that doesn't change God, because it's all happening. All there's the way God and time is something that's beyond. So what will happen is as if it already happened. So therefore, it doesn't change God, because it's already, as soon as the world went into existence, everything that would be already was, and therefore it's like no change in God. Okay, that's a little bit of what the Rambam's talking about. What is the Rebbe saying? The Rebbe says the following thing. V'im harambam omer says b'negel etzem habara, and if the Rambam is making this statement in regards to the essence of the Creator, hari the pachus shaykh lomer came the essence spheres hatzils. We at the very least can say this in regards to the 10 spheres of Atzilut. Now, this line and a half of the Rebbe's teaching on the Rambam, integrating into Chassidus, need a hesper, need an explanation. So to do that, we're going to first take a look at the second chapter of Tanya. In the second chapter of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says the following thing. And on the face value, the Rebbe is saying something different. He's acknowledging what it says in Tanya. He's taking from what it says in Tanya, but he's not exactly saying the same thing. In the Tanya, it says that we are nimshach machshavasa b'chachmasu yisbarach. We are drawn, the souls are drawn from the wisdom of God. That He has wisdom, but not in the wisdom as we are known. But Him and His wisdom are one. He quotes the same Rambam. And the same Rambam says you can't understand this. And then in the note, the Alter Rebbe says in the Haggah, and the sages of Kabbalah agreed with the Rambam, as Rav Moshe Cordovero says in his famous Sefer, Pardes Rimonim, V'gam Lefi Kabbalas Arizal, you see the Milsa B'sod Slap Shasar and Sel Baruch Hu Aydid Simsumim Rabim, B'kelim the Chabad Datzils. Even the Arizal will say that the Rambam is talking about, when you add in and explain it fitting into the multiple concealments of divine light within the context of the Kalim, the vessels of Chabad Abatzilus, but you can't say what the Rambam is saying in the worlds above Atzilus. And then he explains that God is really above Chachma. We associate the world of Atzilus with the world of divine wisdom. But God is really much higher than wisdom. Now, the truth is, the Ramak associates these three levels that the Rambam talks about with Keser, I believe, Chachma and Bina. Now, here, interestingly enough, the Rebbe is saying something that may or may not be the same as the Alter Rebbe. What is the same is he's saying, you could say this at least in Esesfirot Atzilut. You could say that what the Rambam says is within the context of the 10 Sfirot of Atzilut, the Rambam rings true. That is apparently how the Alter Rebbe reconciles the Rambam with the Kabbalists according to the Ramak and the Arizal, each one respectively. The Alter Rebbe has his own minor differentiations from the Ramak. But that's not the part that's different. The part that may be different is the Rebbe just being intellectually honest, or is he saying something way deeper than people understand? When he says, V'im harambam omer zos b'negel etzem habara. And the Rambam, when he says this, although he is himself saying it in regards to the etzem habara, at the very least, we can say it for the Esesfiros Atzilus. What is the Rebbe talking about? I believe this is what he's saying. Although the Alter Rebbe in Tanya feels the need to have an answer for what the Rambam is talking about, the Rebbe is able to say that the Rambam is talking about the Etzem Habara. How could you reconcile the Etzem Habara with all of the things that happen within the confines of time and space? So the answer is the Etzem Habara. Just like he has the power in the infinite, he also has the power in finite, and it doesn't affect him and it doesn't change him because he's still infinite. He could be in the world, and in a sense that there is nothing in the world that's outside of him. Everything that ever happened within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, within the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That sounds like Kfira. People might get that confused with Spinoza. No, it's not Spinoza. It's the Baal Shem Tov. And if you continue learning this Maamer, you'll see very clearly that at the very least, the Alter Rebbe explains this in the Olam Atzilus, where he explains Yosef and the Baal Shem Tov. But maybe you could say, that the Rebbe's Miram is that even if you don't agree with the Rambam, perhaps we have to give homage to the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe didn't agree with reading this Rambam into the Atzmos, Etzem Habara. So we have a Masorah, so we have to hold like the Alter Rebbe, but we could at least acknowledge what the Chiddush of the Rambam is. The Chiddush of the Rambam is that nothing in the world happens outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there can't be any multiplicity. And since God knows everything that happens, that knowledge can't affect him and change him in any way. Therefore, it has to happen within him in a way that there's no differentiation between that which is known and the one who knows it, and the ability to know. And that's a major chiddush. It's a major chiddush. I'm not so sure if it's Eisgehalten. I don't want to take responsibility. Check with your local Orthodox rabbi. They'll probably tell you Narshkeit. But that's what I'm thinking. Anyway, we should be Zoicha. The Rebbe taught the Rambam in a different way because he understood the Rambam deeply. He understood the Rambam in a way that integrated philosophy and Kabbalah and Chassidus. And a lot of people don't like to read the Rambam like that, but that's okay. They're entitled not to read it like that. But that's one of the uftus of the Rebbe, to bring learning of the Rambam and how to learn the Rambam in a way that's masim, to fit in with Teres HaKabbalah and Teres HaChassidus.